Greetings, students, and welcome to Google A Deeper Dive, our Week 6. This week, we're going to explore these essential questions. In what ways can we apply our traditional understandings of search to search engines on the free web? And what does the information professional need to know to leverage Google beyond the powers of the average searcher? So our agenda for this lecture is a little bit of an exploration of how Google works under the hood, what we can use in the search box, and maybe how it differs from what we've explored with traditional search tools like databases. What does the advanced search in Google look like, and how do you find it? The contextual filters available in the various different sections of Google, which include Google Images, Google Books, Google Scholar, and Google News. How we can set up Google Alerts. Issues relating to what Eli Pariser calls the filter bubble. A little bit, an introduction to the Google Custom Search Engine. And just a reminder that part of our lecture will be happening with Dan Russell, both through his Voices of Search and also through the Advanced Power Search MOOC you'll be exploring this week as well. So as I mentioned, Dan Russell will be one of our visitors, and I'm hoping that you'll listen to my conversation with him, especially picking up at 1432. Dan and I start talking about search and we get carried away. So just watch the intro and then move over to 14 minutes in. You'll be doing the Power Search MOOC in two parts this week. We'll look at units 1, 2, and 3, and I'd like you to do one activity of your choice from the MOOC. But let's step back a little bit. This week we're looking at search engines, and next week we're going to be looking at directories and portals. So just to get a sense of how they're different. Directories and portals are large subject-specific collections. They could be very broad collections, and we'll see some examples of the subject-specific and the kind of web-scale ones next week, actually in a couple weeks. The thing about directories and portals are they're organized and selected by human beings. It's a lot of work. They are more designed for browsing than for searching, and they really are created to share links with people, the best of. So what we've seen over the course of years is that a lot of the huge directory projects have disappeared. Yahoo Directory has died while Yahoo still lives. And a number of them, like the Internet Public Library, were around and going strong for a lot of years, but then I think the effort was just too great to sustain. We still have USA.gov, which is just relaunched in beta. But search engines, on the other hand, are larger. There isn't any human selection involved. They work with web crawlers and spiders, and they are designed for searching rather than browsing. And the major examples, of course, are Google, Bing, and Yahoo Search. Google is our focus this week and part of next, and for many people, the very concept of search is synonymous with Google. In fact, we use Google as a verb. For many folks, the very concept of Google is that of a homepage. People think of Google and set Google as their homepage. It's the place they go to first on the web. In fact, we call an entire generation the Google generation. So Google is a pretty prominent part of our culture. In a recent study by Project Information Literacy, with Allison Head being the primary investigator, she looked at college graduates, and she discovered, not surprisingly, that Google and Bing were their major sources for information, their primary source of information. Friends came second, then they used Facebook and Twitter, and then if you go down towards the bottom at 19%, you can see the databases we looked at earlier in the semester. So Google is, I guess I'm beating a dead horse to tell you how prominent it is. In your playlist this week, I'd really like you to take a close look at the under the hood information about Google. I'd like you to watch, there's a couple of Matt Cutts, Google scientist, engineer, explains what goes on under the hood. He does a far better job than I could ever hope to. So watch Matt. Of course, when we're talking about algorithms, we're talking about how results are managed and organized, in what order results come up on what we call the SERP, or the search engine results page. Matt Cutts, who has since left Google, describes Google's classic PageRank algorithm technology, which counts the number and quality of links to a page to determine a rough estimate of how important it is, with the rationale that the more important websites have more links coming in from other websites. But this is not the only algorithm that Google uses. In fact, it ranks results based on more than 200 unique signals, including PageRank. And among those determinants are how often search terms appear on the page, where on the page they appear, and Google also accounts for lots of stuff like synonyms. So what I'd like you to do as you move forward in the slides is to take a good look at the latest version of Google's explanation of how search works, with the understanding that Google is not going to give away the store. It is not going to explain all the proprietary concepts, but it'll give you a good sense of how search works, and how, with all those millions of web pages out there, Google ranks your results. And so I'm just going to go through some of the slides that I hope you'll take a deeper dive into as you move through this week's lecture. First, there's a section here on how Google analyzes your words, how it understands the meaning of your search, how it finds pages. So Google tries to build language models to decipher what strings of words mean when it looks in its index, and it interprets spelling mistakes. It tries to understand what type of query you've entered by applying research on natural language understanding. It also tries to understand what category of information you're looking for. So is it a specific search or a broad query? Are there words such as review, pictures, opening hours if you're searching for movies? Are you searching for trending keywords that imply you want content published that day? Are you searching for a nearby business? So those are some of the things it looks at when it tries to analyze your words. Another thing it tries to do is match your search to your needs. And so it analyzes how often and where your keywords appear on a page, whether they're in titles or headings or in the body of the text. It tries to figure out if the page contains an answer to your query and doesn't just repeat your query. So if you're looking for information about dogs, the search algorithms will analyze whether a page contains relevant content, such as pictures of dogs, videos, a list of breeds, not just the word dog repeated hundreds of times. And it also tries to match to see if your page is written in the language you speak, prioritizing your preferred language. So it tries to rank useful pages, and the algorithms analyze loads of factors to try to surface the best information, from fresh content to the number of times your search terms appear, and whether the pages that are being returned have had good user experiences. And so on a certain level, it tries to assess trustworthiness and authority on a subject matter, looking for sites that users valued for similar queries, and prominent websites on the subject link to the page. And there is no substitute for human judgment relating to credibility and authority, your own triangulation, your own fact-checking, but Google is attempting this through its algorithms. Google considers context in organizing search results and ranking results. So it considers information like your location, your past search history, and it claims to tailor results that are most useful and relevant to you in the particular moment. So they use country and location. If you're in Chicago and you search football, Google will show you results about American football and the Chicago Bears first. And I've tried this in Australia, and it really is different. If you search football in London, it will rank results about soccer and the Premier League higher. So let's think about this in the context of the filter bubble that we've been thinking about, and whether this is a good thing or a bad thing on balance. And when you know about this, what strategies might you use to either enjoy these customizations or to compensate for them? This page quotes Larry Page, one of the founders of Google, who once described the perfect search engine as understanding exactly what you mean and giving you back exactly what you want. And so what Google has tried to do is understanding that the format of the web has changed since PageRank technology, and also understanding that there are many different types of web pages. And so if you are looking for directions, for instance, it's going to sense that your query is one that might require directions and a map. And so I'd like you to click on these boxes which talk about the forms of the web pages that are returned on the search engine results page, and take a look at how it decides whether to access the knowledge graph, which we'll talk about a little bit more, directions and traffic, direct answers rather than research type things. Some recent articles talked about how Google has moved beyond PageRank to measure trustworthiness of pages, counting the incoming links as well, but also the incorrect facts within a page. And so this all works by tapping into what Google calls its knowledge vault, which is the storage of facts that Google pulls together to create those knowledge graphs. And so I think what's important to note that it is not just relevance is not just ranked used considering links and in its ranking anymore, but this whole notion of the semantic web. This is what the knowledge graph looks like. It's pulling from Google's knowledge base. And as you search, if you were searching for Thomas Jefferson, it would automatically pull together data that it thinks you may need, images, birth and death dates, the kinds of fun facts kind of things, also media. And that may not actually be what you're looking for, but it pops up there for convenience. And for some people, this really will spark, oh, I really meant I wanted to look for this rather than that. And so these suggestions in the knowledge graph and also will prompt you to discover things, but it'll also maybe verify spelling and other facts that you may need to verify. So that is some of the background on how search works, and I'm hoping you will take a deeper dive yourself. So let's just go over some important concepts and strategies. I know Dan Russell is going to go over some of these more visually, but let's just go over what I think is important. So what works in the search box? You can definitely refine your searches in ways that are similar to the ways we've explored in our database explorations. So, for instance, putting hashtags in front of words or terms in social media will work. Putting a $ in front of a price. Putting a dash in front of a word you want to leave out. The example they give here is a search on Jaguar and speeds with the excluding word for car, so that's a not. Searching for an exact match using phrases inside quotes works here, especially for titles, as we mentioned, in names. And searching for wildcards. The asterisk works for wildcard letters as well as wildcard words. And then, of course, you can also search a range of numbers using ... You can use or to go in between words that you want to use as synonyms. These you can find in the advanced search, but you can also use them in a kind of command line search within Google. So you can search within a site. This is especially useful for large sites like a news site, for instance, like CNN or NBC, or the Olympic site, or within the whole realm of .gov. You only want to find a government document about a very specific issue, and then you can limit it to site:/gov. It's really important that when you use any of these search operators, you do not put spaces between the operator and your search term, otherwise it won't work. You can find pages that link to certain pages. For instance, this will help you determine credibility in sites, depending upon what they link to. Or you can see, if you have your own website, you can see who links to your website. It's handy for finding related websites. You can use or, as I mentioned, as a logical operator in Google. You can get information about a site by using info:. And you can also, there's a couple of ways to do this, but you can see what the page looked like last time Google visited it. And that is handy when a site is temporarily down, especially. This is just a little summary of the whatever it is, that you might be able to use. And so if you only want to search within a particular URL or within a title, this is handy. So when you find the word in a URL or in a title, it's likely to be a more relevant result.
Let's take a look at advanced search. Google just keeps hiding it, and they keep hiding it in different places every year or so. Right now, you could certainly link to the advanced search page, which is what I used to do for my high school students. I really want them to discover it, and you may want your clients and patrons and users and students to discover it too. So that's an easy way to do that with a lovely logo. But first, you do your search. And then after you do your search, if you go into settings and go down to the fourth item there, you'll see advanced search. And advanced search is important. Many people don't really know what the power of the under the hood search options are. Certainly, if you know things like file type, and if you know the operators, and if you know the various different fields, you can just type them in with their codes in the line above, like a command line search. But many people need the scaffold of the advanced search page. And so let's take a closer look at that.
And so among the items you can find on the advanced search screen are things that I absolutely love. So you can avoid quotation marks, for instance, by typing your exact word or phrase. You can exclude words. You can get a range of numbers here, just as you would with some of those tricks we showed. You can restrict to a particular region. You can use only safe results. A couple of the things I like very much are the time range. If I want only very recent stuff in the advanced search, I can set that. If I'm looking for media, for instance, and I want to get Creative Commons media, I can filter by usage rights. So I can make sure that I'm not using copyright-only images. I really like searching by file type, because sometimes if I want a very large document, perhaps bylaws or a government document or a curriculum, a syllabus, very often in that case I'll search by PDF. Sometimes I want to see how other people have presented on a topic, and I can search for PowerPoints that have been loaded on the web that way. I can search for spreadsheets. I can search for Word documents. And so I really like to search by file type. And then you can also find your search terms anywhere on the page, in the title, in the text, or in the URL. And so searching for the year and using the advanced search features can be. My guess is that most of you know that there's more than one place to start within Google, and sometimes where you start makes a big difference. We're going to take a little tour of some of my favorite places to start, and these are wonderful tricks to introduce to patrons and students and users. As we look at these tricks, I think what's also important to know is Google's filters. These are the filters. Remember, we looked at these in Discovery Search, the filters that appear after you do your initial search in that first box. That's the case with Google too. Within each of the areas of Google, each of the Google searches, you'll get contextual filters. And those filters will be important, especially for the particular media or the type of documents you're looking for. This is just the general Google. After your search filters, notice that you've got them divided into actually some of the other searches. So you'll be able to access news, images, videos, books, and more from that. But when you click on the word tools in any of the areas that you're searching within Google, you'll get various different filters. Often you're going to get this time setting filter. And I love the idea that we can really specify. So if you've seen something recently in the news that you can specify within the past 24 hours, that's when you want your result. And the ability to set up a custom range of dates is very important, and it's often overlooked by most users. So let's take a look at what these contextual filters look like. Within Google image search, there are so many fabulous features. In image search, for instance, after you do your image search for something broad like feathers, it's really handy, for instance, to see if you can reuse these and to get the licensing and there to look for the least restrictive use, perhaps. So that might be labeled for reuse with modification. Again, you can use a time range, you can use a size range, a color, and for instance, if you went with black and white in images, you can in some cases you'll see diagrams and sometimes you'll find clip art that way. But you can see I obscured it, but on the top you see those clusters. So in the clusters you would have seen drawings and clip art, and Dan Russell will show that as well. I love filtering by color, and you can see that you can choose any of those boxes. And when I filtered for purple feathers, look how pretty these are. So that's a lovely trick. This is what the advanced search looks like in Google. And again, it kind of mirrors those filters that we looked at. This is one of my very favorite tricks, and I often use it to determine who actually created an image, because sometimes images are just posted not by the image creators. So if I got this picture of Starry Night and I just dragged it in on top of the search box in Google Images, then immediately I can figure out what painting that is, that it is indeed a Van Gogh. And that actually it's giving me a little wrong information there. It's giving me the Night Cafe, but I believe this is Starry Night. But I would find that out if I read through that result. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that you don't need to be in a Google image search to do a reverse image search. If you're on the web and you're curious about the origins of an image, you can just, if you're on a PC, right click on the image, or I guess it's a command, hold it down on your Mac, and then you'll get a box that automatically opens, and you can do a reverse image search directly on the image itself. The contextual filters for videos are fun too, of course. Again, after you do your search, you'll see under settings the options, and they'll fill in on the line underneath, and you can see that kind of faintly here. But you can select videos from any source, including YouTube, Smithsonian, Giphy, Vimeo, Forbes, and Scholastic. That has changed recently, so keep an eye on that, and forgive me if it changes again suddenly. You can choose the quality of your video, you can choose the length or duration of your video, you can choose whether you want your video to be closed caption, and you can choose how recently you would like the video to have been produced, or select a custom range, much as you could in the other contextual filters. And of course, There is an advanced video search which allows you to examine other metadata or fields that are contained that go along with the video. So please take a good look at that. And let's talk about Google Books. Google Books has been a librarian's best friend, and it can be your best friend. But it is a contentious theme and topic, and so we'll take a look at it. But I want to look at its features first. It is very overlooked by searchers, starting for looking for an obscure piece of information, like how much carpenters were paid in the year 1807. That's hard to find on regular Google search, but it is something that Google Books can often do for you, because there will be all of these public domain books and pamphlets and magazines that you would not really expect, all sorts of ephemera. And I have used this very, very successfully for the most taunting of questions, and also for student historical research, as well as to see whether I wanted to buy a book, to read a section of a book. So anyway, it has been a wonderful tool for librarians. Just like the other Google searches, there are contextual filters. In this case, you can look for any type of document, books, or magazines. You can look at different languages, use a safe search, hide any results that you want to deem as private. Again, there's an advanced search. You can do a time of publication search or do a custom range, often very, very handy, especially for primary sources. And very importantly, we'll look at this in a second in a larger slide, the amount of information that is contained in the record or result. So very often you're going to look for books for which there is at least some preview available, but sometimes you're going to look for books to identify a title, and this is connected with other types of library searches, so we'll look at that as well. But in general, when it says full, that means the whole book is available in public domain from one of Google Books' partner projects or through the publisher's permission. If it says limited, that means that a limited number of pages are offered with permission, with certain restrictions on copying, downloading, and printing. If it says snippet, that means a few sentences surrounding each of the search terms you typed are going to be in the results when Google does not have permission of the copyright owner. And this is the controversial area with Google and copyright. Google believes that snippets do not require permissions, and courts have agreed with Google when there have been major suits in federal courts or district courts with publishers suing Google, the Google Books Project, or Google. And if it says no preview, that means there's just basic information about the book, and this is for books that have not been digitized or text not searchable, but only the metadata is available, like from a library catalog. There's a lot of wonderful features to think about when you're looking at Google Books. One, especially for full books or books in public domain, is that, say you're doing LibGuide for this class, you can embed the entire book in a box in your LibGuide by clicking on that little link on the top and getting the embed code, and then it'll open just as it does in Google Books. Another thing to consider is that libraries are connecting their collections with Google Books, and you can do that through WorldCat, or you can do that with major types of OPACs, and you can see that my local holdings are listed. This is in public domain, and I probably wouldn't need to go there to get that book, but I might want to go and get the audiobook or the ebook. In any case, and it's also showing me, of course, the various different Pride and Prejudice books, including Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies. And so there are so many features here. That's just a couple. I mentioned the connections between Google Books and library catalogs. Google Books, in some ways, is making our catalogs more visible and our books more discoverable. And this is a link to OCLC's WorldCat, and it asks, how can a library make holdings searchable for WorldCat, Google, Yahoo, and other partner sites? And it suggests that you do that by contributing data about your holdings to the WorldCat database using OCLC through batch processing. And subscribe to the WorldCat database on the First Search reference service. And you can find out more about this probably in your cataloging class. But understand here that a Google search, when connected to a catalog, will make library holdings more discoverable. And for times when a book is not available full text or in full form in Google, often it's a lifesaver for a patron to know where locally they may go to get the entire book. Of course, like for the other Google services, Google has an advanced book search, which has the usual suspects, including ISBN or ISSN, if in case it's a serial. And this is a really interesting project. This, because of Google Books, Google has been able to engage in developing this scholarly tool called the Ngram Viewer. And the Ngram Viewer allows for you to search a word or phrase and discover its frequency across the huge corpus of Google Books text. You can set language and date ranges, and you can embed or share the results on social media because it will yield an embeddable graph. And you can even choose language. And this is just a powerful tool. The lines on this graph describe the frequency of the words childcare, kindergarten, and nursery school from 1950 to the year 2000. I want you to imagine the possibilities for research. In the old days, we would use books of concordances that were available for specific authors or specific types of work. This changes everything. Ngrams have advanced search features. Now, I just really want you to take a good look at this and to imagine the situations in which an Ngram search might help a researcher. And this is not going to be for your typical third grader, of course, but just imagine the historical researcher or somebody involved in linguistics or somebody doing a comparative study of some sort. Keep this in the back of your mind, and I have a feeling Ngrams will come up as a possible search tool for you. So I mentioned that Google Books has been contentious. This article in Atlantic a couple of years back describes some of the controversy and summarizes the Federal Circuit Court made it clear that Google Books is legal. A three-judge panel on the Second Circuit ruled decisively for the software giant against the Authors Guild, a professional group of published writers which had alleged that Google's scanning of library books and displaying of the free snippets online violated its members' copyrights. The Authors Guild filed a suit 10 years ago, but the theory behind the eventual ruling was a quarter century in the making, and it had to do with the concept of fair use, which lets people use and adapt copyrighted works without getting explicit permission from the owner. And you can read more about that in the Atlantic article, but just you need to be aware of this controversy. In spring of 2018, Google introduced a new Google Books search, and it's called Google Books Talk to Books. And so it makes use of natural language searching, or your everyday kind of typical way you'd enter a question into a search box. And what it does is it makes use of all of those scanned pages. You can remember, you can search all of the content in Google Books, even though all the books are not available. So it makes use of all of that scanned content, and it allows us to get results that come out of the dialogue within the conversation within books. And so it has a type of artificial intelligence that allows it to predict how likely a statement would be connected to the possible responses in the text within books. And so it's a really good idea to give this a try when working with a sticky question. And you'll see some sample searches on my blog post and in the example within Google Talk to Books, that show you in what ways this might be most useful. So here are some examples, and among the examples they give in Talk to Books is why did World War I happen? And you can see that there are a number of books by historians, some quirky things that you may not have expected to come up. But if you read the passages, you might see different approaches to an answer to a question that you have that may move you well beyond an encyclopedia type response, typical nonfiction to narrative nonfiction, more esoteric and more interesting choices than you may have imagined. And then there's a sort of question that is not necessarily fact-based, but how do you improve as a singer? In that case, you'll get opinions from various different experts, from how-to books, possibly from articles and collections in an anthology. It's really well worth a try. And you also need to be aware of Google's history of introducing and abandoning projects. Uh, in fact, I've written several blog posts about my laments. They're probably in the playlist about the sorts of things that I've loved that Google has just kind of let slide as an experiment that maybe we put some time and effort into it, but maybe we don't need to continue it because it's not their business. Google is a business, regardless of everything we're talking about and how much I seem to gush about it. Google is a business, and you are a customer, and it is not a public service. However, the Google Books project seems very much like a public service. So I don't know that we can count on Google Books being a forever friend. So in fact, there have been efforts that will help us just in case Google Books disappears. Though it began with books that were digitized by the Google Books projects, and many large libraries participated to have their collections digitized by Google Books. A project called the Hathitrust Digital Library evolved a couple of years ago, and its primary goal was to ensure the long-term preservation of digital materials and also make texts available for computational research to allow access to in-copyright material as far as the law allows. So it also has as one of its goals to make materials available to persons with print disabilities, and when originals are damaged, lost, or not available at a reasonable market price, to make them available, and to also identify orphan works in public domain. And so in 2012, a district court found that using Google Books scans to make books available to blind students was not only fair use, but also required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I think we talked about Google Books enough. Let's move on to a couple of other features. And one of them is Google News. It is a handy way to get the news that you are most interested in. So you can use Google News to find out what's happening in the world and in the places you care about. And you can read stories from different points of view. And we'll look at other sources of news and perspective in another module. But you can sort by various things, like where you can see that you've got headlines, local sections. You can set up your interests. You can set up sources that you're interested in. You can set up time ranges and sort by relevance or date. And you can see that you can get local or national news, and you will see trending stuff by those tags in those little rectangular boxes. So Google News is handy. And this is a little piece that shows how news is selected, and you can see that there are algorithms that are described. And then there's also something called trending. And this is the back end in which you can manage your interests. And I'm sure you've seen publications that push content to you in a kind of current awareness strategy through RSS feeds and things, or Google Reader. But this operates in a way that, again, like you can identify your interests and material will be pushed to you. There is, of course, an advanced search feature to Google News, and please take a look at that. And then there is Google News Lab, and that is a different sort of thing. It's aimed at journalists by offering them tools, data, and programs, but it may be very useful to you as a professional searcher as well. And you can take a look at these tools. And in fact, I'm hoping that you will try one of them out. These are simple little quick lessons on how to use various different Google features. And these are aimed at journalists, but also very good for students and for librarians. There is also something called Google Data Explorer, and it was launched in 2010, and it includes public data and forecasts from a range of international organizations and academic institutions, including the World Bank. The data are displayable as graphs and plotted on maps to be shared or embedded. In 2016, it was enhanced with Google Analytics Suite, which enables the import of public or individual data sets and overlaid user-friendly data visualization tools. My guess is if you're in the data science concentration, you'll probably be playing around with this a little bit more. And then there are Google Trends, and you can see what's going on around the world in terms of news stories and how they're trending. At the time I took this screenshot, it was the end of the season of Game of Thrones, and indeed it was trending. Here's a closer look at the types of visualizations that you'll see relating to Google Trends. And this may be also very useful as you're following a story to imagine what the big questions are and what are the most searched ideas. So one of the things you'll discover is one of the major forces that is changing search in Google is the influence of mobile and mobile search. People are using their phones and mobile devices more and more often as a search tool, and the interfaces are changing to reflect mobile users' needs. And so this is an article in which you can learn more about how you can maximize Google search And I also often set up Google Alerts. So the things I'm most interested in, I can set up an alert, and I could make sure I will get reference. I have it sent to me via email, but you can choose RSS as well. And I want to do a little bit of reputation management. And so I have an alert set up for my name in social media. However, you can set up an alert for any area of your personal interest. You can always get rid of it. And if you're doing some serious research on something, you can set up, do your search first, make sure it works, and then set it up as a search alert. You will be creating for one of our search activities, probably this week, a Google custom search engine. And you may not have ever seen these before or thought you've never seen these before, but I find this is just like the car you just bought. As soon as you realize that you're looking for a Google custom search, you're making one, you'll see that most major search tools or platforms already have a Google custom search. So you do the search for people in advance, and you'll see a lot of examples on our LibGuide. And you specify the types of places you want, or the specific places you want the Google custom search to search, and it will search only in the sites that you've identified. So it eliminates a lot of noise. If you're a teacher, this is great. You might want to, if you're looking at primary sources for AP US history, you might want to set up the major museums and presidential libraries and institutions, and then the search will only search there, and you can keep adding to them and make it a very comprehensive list. So you'll be doing that for a subject you're interested in. And then, of course, there's Google Scholar, one of the real biggies. And students and scholars who seek academic material often begin their searches in Google Scholar. Google has arrangements with universities to create links to the university's full text holdings. So if you do a search in Google Scholar, remember link resolvers, there will be a link resolver to your university collection that could pop up. Google Scholar has limited full text, but it is a standalone search engine for research materials and journal articles and reference and textbooks, especially because material may not be easily discovered in other search tools. So students who find material often need to go back to their school or university's database to get the full text. It also offers a patent search, and it, of course, as I mentioned, links to library holdings. And so this is probably one of the first places a scholar or a student really would search when looking for academic content. And there's a lot of other features in Google Scholar that people don't always discover. I happen to love the citation tool. So this is what Google Scholar looks like, and as you can see, you can use that citation tool. You have date ranges, you have some advanced features on the left, and then it's not perfect, but there is an automatic search site over here, and you can choose ALA, MLA, Chicago, Harvard, or I'm not sure if that says Turabian, but and then you can also export to a citation generator or citation management system. And another thing that you can do is see who cited the article. You can also see related content, and you can also set up an account where you can save content. Of course, there is an advanced search screen for Google Scholar. And there are some contextual searches like return articles published in, and then you could specify the academic journal, and there's a date range as well. We spent a lot of time earlier in the semester thinking about where we should start, which databases to choose, which aggregators to choose, whether we should start with discovery or go into an individual database, what words we should use, what's in our toolkit. I think you're going to want to really consider where to start within the giant that is Google as well. If you think back to Alice in Wonderland, Alice meets the Cheshire Cat and she asks, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" The cat says, "That depends a good deal on where you want to go." Alice says, "I don't care much where." The cat says, "Then it doesn't matter much which way you go." And Alice responds, "So long as I get somewhere." The cat says, "Oh, you're sure to do that if only you walk long enough." If we had the luxury to walk long enough or the desire to do that, yes, I think we'd probably find what we are looking for. But it really helps within Google to decide where to start. And the major Google search box, just the general one, doesn't always do the trick in a strategic way. And so as we examined all of the various different types of Google, we should be starting to think about some strategies about when to use which. And so just to review, I did this post that was concerning me when I was asking that question and thinking about Alice. When do we use Google Books? And I hope you'll get a chance to read this one post. I've identified a few times when researching a topic around which we'd like to get in-depth information, when we think the table of contents or the index may help us understand the topic and the way it's organized, when we're reading something referencey or researching something that referencey, historic costume, when we're looking for glossaries or manuals or even old ephemera. When we're researching a topic for which our best sources might all exist in the public domain, so we know the books will be there as full Google books. When we're looking for government documents or pamphlets or ephemera or gray literature, we'll look at what gray literature is later, the unpublished large contents that are hard to find sometimes. They may be in Google Books. Or when we want to embed things like ebooks and full text sources in our LibGuides, and we can get those lovely embeddable links from Google Books. So the same is true when we're looking for images. When do we start with a Google image search? Among the reasons are you're looking for charts or diagrams or illustrations. You need to implement a comprehensive Creative Commons license search, and you can do that either from the advanced screen, or you could learn some of the file types, or there's under tools you can do that. When you need to search for images that are of a specific shape, orientation, file type, or color, when you face that frequently asked question about that book with dogs and a teal colored cover, happens to me so many times, especially when I was in a public or elementary school library. Searching Google Books with a color and an idea for the topic, that is just almost a magical kind of search. When do you use Google Scholar? When you want a quick grasp on the academic conversation around a topic, when you want to discover the works of leading authors in an area of research, their previous work, their collaborators, when you want to get quick citations or verify citations and get missing elements for references, I'm always going there when I'm finishing a bibliography. When you want to get related articles and versions of an article, and because it says the multiple versions in which an article is available, including links to available material in HTML or PDFs, Google Scholar is magical again. When you're tracking citations both forward and backward, we talked about research strategies like that. When you want to see the provenance or the progression of a scholarly conversation, when we're finding case law, when we want to discover academic books from Google Books or conference proceedings, there's overlap there, dissertations, documents, and reports. When you want to introduce a young researcher to the world of academic content and help them identify journal titles and authors connected with the subjects of their interests. And again, to find gray literature or conference proceedings. And then there's Google News. And you can use Google News when you want to easily scan the news around the world relating to the topics you care about, when you want to help students find news in a variety of languages, when you want to easily scan your local news, when you want to set up your own sections of interest for current awareness, when you want to explore the fabulous lessons for journalists that are also good for librarians and kids at the Google News Lab Training Center. Google also has a number of educational features and tools. This is Google Search Education, and we'll be digging into that in the next week or two. You can actually, for groups of students, turn Safe Search on or off to have some filters for the sorts of things that you want to protect children from. And as I mentioned before, this is a really important thing. I can geek out about search engines, but in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking that Google, Bing, and Yahoo may appear to be utilities designed for public good, but they're really built on business models. They are motivated by advertising revenue. They are not designed for young learners, and while they may offer some resources for educators and students, what's best for schools and society is not foremost in their developers' minds. This week, you'll be looking also at Eli Pariser's TED Talk on the filter bubble And really, in essence, what that talk is about, many of you may have already seen it, is why one person's Google search may not be another person's Google search. And you may be seeing what's called a filter bubble, and possibly also called an echo chamber. You may not be seeing a full range of results, but the ones that Google or your search engine thinks you want to see, and there's a difference. And so you may not, you may be obscuring a lot of content that might be very important to you. So it's very important to be aware of that. And so this has been a long one, but summing up, this week we take a deeper dive into Google, understand its features to become better searchers ourselves, and to help us teach others. To see the connections between our traditional search engines and Google search. I meant search databases and strategies and Google search. You'll be taking part in Dan Russell's Advanced Power Searching MOOC, the first sections of it. And we'll be visiting Dan Russell with Voices of Search. And next time we'll dig a little bit deeper into search engines. You'll be working on creating a Google custom search, and I will see you in the threads.